David Schnurman. What a great honor to speak to this man. 45 years old. He's out of Brooklyn, New York now. He spent some time in Barcelona, lived there. He is CEO of Lawline. It's a lawyer's education platform, continual education. But what's fascinating about David is his road to get there. His youth was, sales job after sales job. He decided to go to law school like his father did. His father, drove cabs to keep him in college. But what he decided, he turned it around. David was able to get his father's something that he started and continue on. But it's a great discussion on his new book, which all talks about, it's called the fast forward mindset. But it's a great about getting out of the comfort zone, staying in it, nipping fear in the bud, finding focus. Really great conversation. He gives me inspiration to do certain things, the way he journals, the way he uplifted his family. He went to Barcelona for 2 years, and he was president of entrepreneurial organization in New York City for a year after being asked many times. And just a fascinating man. And I really enjoyed the conversation. A lot of great inspirational notes I think you're going to get from it. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. It's really cool. David Schnurman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Did you being called, an oaf when you were younger, did that fuel you eventually?
I don't know if it fueled me, to be honest. I think maybe one of the things it helped me realize, though, I wasn't overly bothered by it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Nobody wants to be called names, but I didn't sleep over it. Like, I wasn't losing sleep over it. But certainly, it was a little different because it was my best friends calling me oaf. And so they're quick to point out, since I've done my TEDx talk, like, it's not, they wouldn't call it quote unquote bullying, because they say, maybe back in the 80s or 90s, it's teasing,
right?
This is bullying. But I could tell you, though, I certainly, I think everybody's more aware of how names can affect somebody. But I'm still not, I'll say this, the one area where I became a quote unquote athlete in my life was running, because you don't need to do anything. Running and tennis and skiing. So I was always really good at the solo sports versus the team sports.
Yeah, that's what they are. So I'm golf and tennis, although I love to watch team sports. But yeah, it's like we kind of migrate to those, don't we? I really enjoyed your TEDx, by the way. I know you went through a lot to do it, and you said that you hired a coach to kind of tell you how to tell stories. What was that process like?
That was as fun, or even more fun, than doing the TEDx itself. Because it actually started before the TEDx. I gave a keynote speech at a legal tech conference, because that's the industry I'm in. And it was on how to, get out of your comfort zone and be more fearless and focused. and it was actually became the framework of my book. And
Yeah.
so it was in front of 500 attorneys at a huge conference, and I wanted to do it right. So we met once a week for I think 10 weeks,
Wow.
and we would record my speech. So I had to come up with a speech, and every week she would watch it, she record it, and then we go over how I can improve. And what made it so special is she's an actress, so she really worked on like two things. One was storytelling, because too often you just get right into it. Two was talking in present tense versus
Hmm.
in the past. So as you're talking about it, you're acting as if it's happening right now. And you can see this technique a lot in reality TV shows. When they have the person talking about what's going on, they're always talking in present tense as it's happening.
Hmm.
Um, and then the third, I would say, is she had me like what she called show up late and end early. So it's kind of how you started this podcast, to be honest. You didn't give me a whole intro. Maybe you do that later. You didn't give a whole thing. You just asked the first question. And so the way she taught it is like you actually start the speech as if you're in the middle of it and people are
Mm.
trying to catch up. Because too often, how does the speech start? Hi, my name is David Schnurman. I am talking about this. And then you
Ah,
just lose them. So you got to say, I was in the middle of the Philadelphia Marathon and I was at mile 14 and I could not see the finish, like something like that. And that's how I started.
right. Yeah. Yeah. You do a really good job of kind of grasping us, the listener, the watcher, the viewer right away. And when you were over with it, David, I said, how long was that? I looked at the time. I want to say it was like 25 minutes or something. And it seemed like didn't seem that long at all. It was great.
No, and I really appreciate that. And so for me, like one of my things that I'm trying, is how do you go from something that's viewed a few thousand times, right? A book that's
Mm.
bought 5,000 copies, LinkedIn profile, social media that's, tens or 20s or 30s like each time, to that next level where you really have hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people following you. And what is that code to break it there? Because I certainly feel I could have a much bigger impact if I had a bigger audience. And
Mm.
maybe part of the journey is figuring out how to make it happen, right? Like yeah, I'm sure you're trying to figure that out too yourself.
Yeah, and perhaps we all are. You know, show up late, leave early. I'm so adamant about, if you're on time, you're late. It's just that being in business, and when you first said that, I was very turned off. Like that's it. But then as you kind of explained it, so you're saying showing up late, as soon as you show up, you're already in the middle of something. You just kind of skipped. I kind of see that analogy. That's really cool.
Yeah, again, not about actually showing up late, but
Right.
it's the audience is not knowing. They're trying to figure out what's going on in the story. And so it's more entertaining, to be honest. And that's essentially, you need to entertain people if when you're speaking, especially over Zoom, But whoops, that's sorry about that. If someone has headphones on.
It oftentimes I'll launch into a story and I'll hear the people at the dinner table or whoever with, they'll look at me and say, okay, is this a joke? Is this a story? And I won't tell them, I'll just kind of go on with it and they'll have to kind of figure it out. So I guess that's really a similar principle.
Absolutely, storytelling is the key to really. People remember stories; they don't remember outlines.
Mm,
So the more descriptive, and that's like, for example, I don't know if you've ever done any memorization techniques like mnemonics and memory palaces. For a mnemonic, the more outlandish the story is to memorize, somebody's name, you know, what the more crazy the action is, the more likely is you'll remember, Joey Pence,
right.
and so you come up with a story behind it. And that's the same thing with any story you tell. The more descriptive and interesting, the more people remember you. It's not easy.
That's
It's effort.
Yeah, it definitely takes effort. Yeah, and you would think that memorizing a whole story takes more effort, but you're not really memorizing the story. You're just kind of memorizing the plot and the journey, and then the kind of the climax and the struggle. Speaking of which, your youth, your background fascinates me, David. So I mean, you kind of, you have this mission to to be successful, to make money, and you kind of went from sales position to sales position, and then you eventually decided just to go to law school like your father did, so you have a kind of a long career versus small ones.
Yeah, and that's sort of the journey. It's funny because like I recently had to like check myself because to some degree, I've been doing Lawline now since 2007 officially. So it's been a couple of years. It's been 15 years, and to some degree, the story in my head is we would have been a 500-person company by now, doing hundreds of millions or $100 million in revenue, X, Y, and Z, having such impact. And the story in my head was like, damn man, like what's going on? You got to speed this up. And then I flipped it. I'm like, I went to law school so I can have a career for the next 20 years. And look at this. It's 15 years into it, and I've had a career. The longest job I had before Lawline was 3 years maybe. And so I built the dream career because not only has it been 15 years, it's in entrepreneurship, which yeah, it's challenging, but to me, there's no other way I could have went about it because it's like being in school, and I love that freedom of knowing you control your own destiny for better or for worse.
Did going to law school help you in the business world?
I don't think so, to be honest. But it certainly helped me in the legal tech world
Of
because
course.
that's the business that I'm in. So it didn't feel foreign. And I would say that's the biggest thing right there. Like you think if someone goes to law school and they do all this, you don't know what they've learned and you don't know what they know. And you just assume they know a lot more than you than they do. So, you know, being level headed and moving forward in that direction, like I think I could have been a really great practicing lawyer, and I probably would have been if Lawline didn't take off literally in law school my third year. So, and maybe someday I'll practice a little bit here or there. I doubt it, but you never know. I take enough courses in continuing legal education that I potentially could.
And of course, you take those courses with Lawline. Lawline is a continuing education for lawyers. By the way, doing research, I also found out the difference between a lawyer and attorney. An attorney passes the bar, lawyer just graduates from law school.
It's a fine small point, but that is correct. So, I don't think when people discuss lawyer or attorney that I don't think anybody has that definition in their head. Everyone just assumes they're talking about someone who's passed the bar. But
Right.
absolutely, that's you had to look at the actual definition. That is correct.
So if an attorney passes the New York bar and travels to Massachusetts, they're not an attorney there. They're only a lawyer.
I mean, I wouldn't get so caught up in those words.
Nobody's gonna say anything. But Lawline is a great platform that's been around for a long time. I have lawyer friends. I know people that are using it, and it's a great platform to help lawyers with continuing education, which is compulsory.
Yeah, I mean, my dream has always been a lifelong one. And first of all, that's great to hear. It never gets old when I find out if you know somebody who's using Lawline or if you use Lawline. We really, even like literally the past quarter, the past 3 months, we've added so many updates just to the Course Center platform, to the catalog, to the content. And it's constantly evolving because you got to stay ahead and you got to keep current. And, things like ChatGPT and like what's going on there is super exciting because we're using it now in our day to day. It's helping us write better course descriptions. It's helping us write better blog articles, better courses, even like to summarize it. You can do an outline for a trademark course for beginning attorneys in New York. It does a pretty damn good basic job. So I'm super excited what the future brings for learning in general, not just in continuing education, but in higher ed and schools. My kids' school, they go to public and private school in New York City. I don't know. I think a month after ChatGPT went live, which if anybody doesn't know, is essentially Google on steroids.
Huge.
They banned it in the schools, and I think it's the wrong approach. I understand why they do it because they need to control it really quick, but it's the approach should be, oh, cool. Let's see how we can explore this in the school as a tool for you to think differently. But maybe I'll start my own school someday. That just seems like a lot of work though.
It does, yeah. I remember The owners of WeWork tried to start a school. I remember reading about that. That's not the best example, but yeah, ChatGPT is certainly changing the landscape. I mean, I use it all the time. I start asking random questions. I just some questions that are really kind of you know, what's the best way to lose weight? You know, what you know, I just try to ask it these questions and see how it responds. And uh, it's like you say, it is a game changer.
Yeah,
But
it's less exhausting, right? Because
mm,
with Google, you can put that in there, then you got to kind of search the results and find the right.
right.
And the part that's a little bit like scary though, it does such a great job at the answer. It's hard to see if it's right or wrong. Like I said,
Mm,
with David Schnurman, and I'm not famous enough yet that it would have the right exact thing. So it gave my LinkedIn profile, gave different things, but it gave like a different place where I live, a different company that I run.
oh
I'm not
wow.
sure. And I'm like, and I responded, that's not right. And it said, oh, sorry about that. And then got the right stuff.
Did it
So
really?
just be careful. The first answer might not be the right answer.
I remember I had to compare two different things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with EOS, you know, the
Of course.
entrepreneur.
Of
Of
course.
course you are. Yeah. I compared that with Connect Strat, which is kind of operations. And when I first asked it, it didn't know the difference between, it didn't know them. And so then I spelled it out versus the acronyms, you know, just to kind of get their opinions. Which leads me to YEO or just EO, which you're a huge advocate of. You were past president, you were a mentor in that program. Are you still with the program? Do you still recommend?
So I'm still a member of Entrepreneurs Organization. This past year, I also joined YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, which is generally
Ah,
um, larger businesses, usually over 10 million in revenue. And that one, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be part of it. You can be like the CEO of you know, a significantly sized business and still be a member. So it's more diverse in that way. EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, has been transformational in my life, personally, professionally, family wise. As far as moving to Barcelona with my family for 2 years was EO was sort of the catalyst to that, and one of the main
mm,
reasons I was successful, to helping me find a mortgage for my house from an EO member who used somebody that was really helpful for me year after year, to actually hiring a scaling up coach, which is
mm,
similar to EOS, and who worked with us for 6 years that helped us build processes in our business, to even hiring an executive coach who has a company called Frame of My Coaching, Kim Addis, and we ended up working with our company with all of our executive team, and it's more about like what you focus on grows. It's the thinking behind what leads to the outcomes, and too often people like focus on the results. So those are some very quick examples, but I said early on the amount of money and value that I got from EO, I can never cancel my membership. But every year you still got to the more you put in, the more you get out. So if
mm.
you're not an active participant, you're not going to get much out of it.
Yeah, you mentioned Kim Addis. I'm a big fan. I've spoken to her before. She's great, and I know people in EO that really, really, you know, love. Nobody ever speaks badly about it. And just like you said, the more you put in, the more you put out. I joined like a peer group, a tech peer group, for a while, and it did really well for me. I'm not in it anymore, but I wonder at this juncture if it's something I should pursue. I should take a look at that. What is a SHA, an SHA?
I call myself a self-help addict. So I made up that term. I don't know if anyone else uses it. And it's sort of the catalyst that led to me writing the fast forward mindset. My entire life, I read book after book after book. And one of the things I realized is you read 10 books, you'll probably get 1 to 3 books that really have an impact. And like,
Hmm.
so that's okay though, because I think some people feel bad when they read book after book and they're like, I don't know what I did here or whatever. And so, yeah, I love to consume knowledge and find those points. And there's maybe a handful of books that have completely shifted the course of my life,
Hmm.
and continuing. So if I read 10 books a year or more or less, and a lot of books I start and I don't finish, I'm okay with that. Like it's the cheapest our cheapest you can spend to get the highest ROI out of
Hmm.
anything in life is from a book. So, but a coach is super important if you want things to stick long term. So originally read the Scaling Up book. That was way too complicated to do on my own, so that's why we needed a
Yeah.
coach. But I read the book, The Success Principles by Jack Canfield, and I listened to it and I read it, and it transformed my life and some of the things, some of the principles that were on there. And they were simple, like take 100% ownership over your life, keep all your commitments. But the way he kind of laid it out, or how to win, well, not how to win friends and influence people. That was an impactful book, but Dale Carnegie's book, how to stop worrying and start living. It was written 70, 80 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the tone is a little off, but what he says in there, like we all have super, I mean, at least everyone I know has a lot of anxiety in different areas. And so
Hmm.
that book was transformational. And then the third one was The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. Because that helped me. I didn't think I was a morning person, or I didn't want to be. I pushed myself to wake up an hour earlier. And as it turns out, my best and most productive time is between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m.
Hmm.
The hard part is, being up and ready, 5:30 or 6 to do it. And I spend that first hour not on my business, but on myself. I journal,
Hmm.
I meditate, I focus, I write posts I write a daily post on LinkedIn every single day, weekday. And I wait until that moment to figure out what it's going to be. So part of the fun is seeing how do you go from being stuck and then like, okay, I'll write on that. So yeah.
Mentioned some really, really great books there, and I like your LinkedIn posts a lot. And so, what your whole book is about getting out of your, the comfort zone. Your writing process. You talked about journaling every morning. Did you just convert your journals into the book?
So two things. One, it's not just about getting out of your comfort zone because there's a ton of books about getting out of your comfort zone. It's how once you get out of your comfort zone, which I'm that type of impulse entrepreneur, I can get out of my comfort zone really quick. Many
Mm.
times I want to get right back in and get in the fetal position as soon as I do it. So it's not only how to get out, but how to stay out longer and not go back in. And that
Mm.
really is geared towards those impulse entrepreneurs who don't have the focus or don't have that ability to when the wall comes to them, you know, you pivot, but how do you break through the wall? So that, just to be clear, and it was written for me first. If I figured if I can use it in the writing process, it was not. So yeah, part of it was my journaling because what I did was I didn't want to just, like I told you, storytelling is a big part of it. So I didn't write a book that's just like, here's how you get out of your comfort zone. Step one, step two. I took people through the first 5 years or so, maybe the first 10 years of Lawline, of all the ups and downs of the business, mostly the downs, and how I got through them and through this framework, which wasn't a framework at the time. And then because I'm a Shah, I think I cite upwards of 20 books, 20 best-selling books and their key concepts in the fast forward mindset. Um, so I reference those and I also reference research, but I think it's a combination of the coaches that I work with, the books that I reference, and my personal experience that makes it the personal stories that make it, I think, an easy read. Plus, you can listen to it on Audible in under 3 hours, about 3.5 hours. So it's pretty quick.
Yeah, your first chapter where you talk about, not labeling a situation good or bad. And I've heard you say the story a couple of times where the farmer and the son, of course, and it's such an important lesson to. It's hard to do sometimes, though, David. But whatever has transpired, is it good or bad? It doesn't matter.
Hal Elrod, so it's kind of funny. I ended up becoming friends with him after I read his books. I reached out to him. It was early
Great
on,
book.
and then
Yeah.
he ended up writing the preface or the intro for my book, which was an honor. One of the things that he says, and he's been through a fucking sorry,
Yeah. No,
he's been
no, swear.
he's been through shit, right? Like the car accident, recently
Yeah.
cancer. He has the saying, if when something bad happens, you give it like 5 seconds, or now he says he's expanded to 5 minutes. And then once that's done, you say, can't change that, right? You can't change that result, so you move on. So that's sort of like no labeling is it happened, and you don't want to live in a world of like, I wish that did not happen to me. I wish, because you hear it time and time again, right? Like the True Hollywood story, when people are at their lowest or what seems the worst, you know, that's where they many times can build a whole new level of themselves. Of course, not everybody can. That same story is in parallel with people who don't do it and people who do.
Right.
But so yeah, so that was really, I think, the biggest thing also to help me make decisions, because if you're afraid to make wrong decisions because it's gonna be wrong, and that's one of the things that held me up a lot, and probably still does in business and life. One of them right now is I'm very close. I won't say it.
To making a major decision, and you're shying
Well,
away from it.
And the reason I won't say it, it's not because it's so private, is one of the things I've learned also, when you share something before you've actually made a decision, you get positive reinforcement from just sharing it. So you're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And someone's like, oh, that's so cool. That's amazing. That's very cool. And you like feel good already. And you're like, I don't need to do it anymore. And so when I ran my first marathon, which was inspired by the success principles to keeping your commitment, I was so afraid to tell anyone. I did it with a buddy, and I think we got through 3 months of training and did not tell us. And we were worked together at Lawline. We didn't tell a single person at Lawline, a single other person that we knew except our families, that we were running the marathon, because we didn't want to get that positive reinforcement from people saying, oh, that's so cool. So if I do what I say I'm going to do, you'll be the first to know.
I appreciate that. When we talked briefly before, but when I started my business back in the 90s and I ended up gaining all the weight, I got up to 340 pounds. The doctor said, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. That was all I needed to hear. And I made a commitment.
I realized when you said you lost weight, how much weight you actually lost. Wow.
Oh, I was 340. Yeah. I lost about 140 pounds, but I didn't tell anybody. Just like you just said, I didn't tell anybody, hey, I'm going to get down to 195. I didn't tell anybody. I knew what my weight was. I worked out every day. I cut everything I ate in half. I just did steps to, I still had a cheeseburger, but I only ate half of it. I still didn't drink any sugar drink. My point is that I didn't tell anybody. And then once I got to there, I had 7 or 8 big bags of clothes that I had to throw out, and that was kind of my own prize. And I didn't tell anybody I was losing the weight. People see me and they kind of, just like you said, because if I did share that, they say that's great, and I get this reinforcement. But if something happened and I wasn't able to do it, all of a sudden I'm kind of caught in this position in between. So I admire that, how you went, and I did 5 triathlons afterwards, and I didn't tell anybody I was training for that as well. Yeah. I didn't tell anybody I was training for that, although I did hire a coach. You end up, you love to swim, you tolerate the bike, and you hate the run. But it's just fun. And then, but again, I didn't tell anybody, just like yourself. Your book goes through like the 3 steps of, you talk about the comfort zone. There's some strategies there. You talk about nipping fear and finding your focus. I really enjoyed the 3 steps that you walk people through, David.
Well, first of all, thank you for reading the book or starting the book. So I appreciate that. And you talk about, so step 1 is getting out of your comfort zone. Step 2 is not falling back into it. And step 3 is staying focused so you can stay in longer. But what I really like about step 2 is you talk about strategies. I give 4 strategies that you can use in that moment, the moment of anxiety when you wake up and you're freaked out. And you don't even know why you're freaked out. And I'm happy to share one or some of them now.
Please.
If you like. So a couple things. One is essentially giving people compliments, right? At the end of the day, like if you're focused on other people and you give them positive reinforcement, you're not focused on you can't frown and smile at the same time. And you're not focused on your own concerns. And by giving people actual real compliments, um, you have that positive energy knowing you're going to give it to them. I certainly journal in the morning, especially when you wake up with anxiety and you're not sure what the anxiety is. It's really helpful to just put it out there. I have this thing where you can't, it's called the no complaints bracelet, or just not complaining. Is while you complain as much as you want in your head, you don't complain externally, and you try to do this competition where you can see how far you can go without doing it. And then the fourth one, obviously, this time and true tested is gratitude, right? Like write down 5 things you're grateful for that moment. And I think it's really important to help people through those moments of anxiety to get them off the edge. And then you can start, focusing on what is the thinking that's leading them there. And so that I think to me that's the most important. Probably don't talk about enough, but the helping people step back off the edge as much as possible. I probably want to work on that more to send that message out there.
Yeah, Dave, that gratitude is just so, you know, you get some bad news. Well, I'm sorry, it's not bad. You shouldn't label it good or bad, but you get some unpleasant news, and some kind of things happened this week that weren't the best. But then I just think I just spent a full week with my 2 daughters last week. How can I possibly be unhappy at this point? The gratitude is so, oh my god, underrated. So that's part of your morning process where you write down 5 things
I
you're
don't do
grateful
that.
for.
I probably should, but I don't do that
Mm,
daily. I do that
mm,
when if I'm in a moment of stress.
mm.
Especially the other thing is contrast, right? The When I have moments of stress, this is from Kim Addis, by the way, I use that as a contrast to when I have moments of sure happiness. So it
Bliss.
helps, yeah. So you can see the difference, and it's important in that, because if you're happy 100% of the time, it it it's just normal. Like I
Right.
don't think it exists. And the second thing is like we live in one of the, if not the best country. Obviously we have a ton of problems, just you can name it, but in terms of the what is it, the ease of living, the
Mm.
opportunities, and you see what's going on just from in so many countries, even like Ukraine obviously be the biggest example, like young men dying every day to protect, missiles going, like it's just like whatever you think you have bad at that moment, there's a lot worse off people all over the world. And that I think is also helpful, like in sort of level setting
Mm.
myself. Um, because generally, whether it's a vanity issue or um, just feeling stressed about the company, like those are, good problems to have versus like shelter, getting through the day, not being bombed, not being killed, and things like that. So
Talking about perspective.
exactly.
Yeah, and perspective goes well with gratitude as well. It really does kind of frame everything. You're giving me some inspiration, David. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah. And what's next with the book? Are you writing another one?
I am. So this book is, again, I said I wrote the fast forward mindset for me. The next book is also for me, but for other people too. And maybe that's just my own insecurity. Like if nobody reads it, at least I have it. But this one is a
Mm,
little. I started it while I was in Barcelona, and it's called the first hundred the, the first 100 days of the rest of our lives, and it talks about how the next 100 days could be the first 100 days of the rest of your life. Now, too
mm,
often we feel stuck in what our life is, and it's like a battleship at this stage, and you can't move, versus like a speedboat that you can move, misdirect, and change. And I think moving to Barcelona was one of those big life altering moments for my family, to literally get up and start fresh for 2 years, and especially during COVID, and do something that we never did before. And so what I do is I share the catalyst of what led to that. I share sort of how it took us 4 years to build up the courage to actually do it.
Mm.
And then I share the first 100 or so days of living in Barcelona through my journals, and obviously I break it down to themes, and I think if anything, it'll be an amazing legacy for my kids when we're older. And by the way, while I was there for the first 150 days or so, I had on the fast forward mindset. I did public journals, so I made it easy because I already posted it all in some format. And then after 150 days, this little thing called COVID happened. So the experience changed. It was still after things leveled out, it was still good, but I really focus on the first 100 to 130 days.
Hmm.
So, like, what can you do? What is something big you can do in the next 100 days that can sort of shift your life, like that you've never done? Jesse Itzler, I don't know if you know him. He talks about, I think it's called masagomi. I forget the word, but it's like do one big physical thing a year, or
Mm.
one big thing a year that you've never done before to challenge yourself. And for me, one year was being president of EO, another year was writing the book, another year was running the marathon, obviously moving to Barcelona, public speaking. And so the one thing that I'm not telling you about might be the next one, but we'll see. So I focus a lot, as you can see, beyond just running the business of Lawline, which of course is where I get a lot of my inspiration, a lot of my talent, working with so many talented people, a lot of learnings. But sometimes I feel, I'm surrounded by such smart people at Lawline. I feel almost, how am I? Like, am I? I don't know. You feel
Mm.
almost less. It's sort of like you feel like the parent to your kids. They've known you for so long. You feel like you're less respected sometimes in the company than outside the company. But that's how it is.
Mm.
As your kids, while they love you and they idolize you to some degree, they don't respect you.
Yeah, I have two employees that are still with me now. That's been with me for over 20 years, and it's the same thing. It's very similar. What kind of perspective did Barcelona give you? You talked about perspective.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things, and it sounds so obvious, but until you've done it, it's hard to understand, is that because it wasn't just Barcelona, we traveled a lot, and I met a lot of people from all over EU, but all over the world, is people are people.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be much harder. Obviously, we went to, you know, Barcelona. It's like a tech hub and everything like that. But in general, I talk to people who came from small towns, or grew up in a small area in Nigeria, and yeah, now he was telling his experience, and from his travel and my travel is just like people just want to live a happy life,
Mm.
and I think the more we can understand that as a society, the more it will open up doors to not like, if you think about Russia, for example, 99% of people in Russia just want to
That's
live
certainly
a
right.
happy life.
Yeah.
But you get caught up in that area, and then of course in Russia you don't want to. You're forced to fight, as many areas are, and there's a lot of different sides and different ways to spin a story, but everywhere. So I'd say that would be my one takeaway there, and then the second being that the world is much smaller than it used to be, and then we're just talking EO. I haven't even explored much of the world, right? But it felt so far off whether I can expand my business to Europe, whether I understand that. But again, knowing that people are people and we all have the same values,
Mm.
and it's just learning the culture a little bit. It was very energizing to see that. And of course, damn, it was beautiful. Oh my God,
Right.
Spain is such a beautiful country. Like I couldn't, and obviously the U.S. is a beautiful country, and like I haven't even, I could, what the eye opening for me was the EU is about the same size, of the U.S.
U.S. Yeah.
A little bigger, but like you can travel, you know 2 hours to be almost anywhere within the EU. So I think there's an opportunity to spend a lot more time in the United States and see the beauty of the nature that's out there versus anywhere else.
My father's an Italian immigrant. When I was 10 years old, first day of summer school, excuse me, summer vacation, last day of regular school, he gave me a suitcase, says, put your clothes in here. uh, David, he didn't even bring me to Queens, JFK. He brought me to the bus terminal, told the bus driver to drop me off Terminal 1, JFK, gave me a plane ticket, a picture. You're going to meet your grandmother in Milan. So a 10-year-old kid on a bus with a suitcase, he'd be arrested now, right? So
Totally.
I went to JFK. I got on the plane. I flew. I found my grandmother and uncle, and I was in Italy and southern Switzerland, every other summer until college. So I experienced, that kind of Southern European life. And just like you say, people are people. You learn that people are happy, perhaps happier, living very differently. Not that it's worse or better, it's just different. And you just learn that the culture matters and just people, they're still the same people.
Well, I loved knowing, looking around at everybody who's from in Barcelona, that they grew up in a completely different culture as me.
Mm,
And I mean, this is really simple, but literally, like restaurants for dinner don't even open till 8.
right.
Like dinner doesn't start till 9:30, 10 most nights if you're going out. In New York, even in New York, I go out most nights by 10 o'clock, it's closed. Like
I was done.
and last night, 9:15 was the last kitchen closed. So that took some, and I like that, it was different. But, or like on the weekends, or if you go out to lunch, if you got to be prepared for a 3 hour, 3.5 hour
Right.
lunch, lots of conversation, lots of eating, lots of drinking. And that's why siesta is a real thing. People close down the stores
Oh,
and they take a nap, but they work later. But
yeah.
you get used to that lifestyle.
You certainly do. And they all walk, they all, it's just so different, and there's wine and there's bread and there's, and people aren't that overweight. That's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, it's just very different. It's very different than and absolutely lovely. We talk a lot on the podcast, talk about losing the weight and everything. People always ask me how I did it, like it's some secret. And I always say discipline, David. I just got focused. I had, they said, the doctor said I wasn't going to see my daughter graduate. By the way, she graduated last year. And I just talk about discipline often. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life.
It is my biggest challenge and antagonist, and I think specifically with like exercise,
Mm,
because but with that, with whether it's waking up early, it's like doing those things that you like. So there's a book, I don't know if you heard of it, it's called Change or Die.
no.
um, and it's so interesting because essentially the book goes back, like there's a lot of research and studies, but it's based on the premise that 90+% of people who are told, like you were told, if you don't change your behavior, such as people who have heart conditions, artery, similar to that, you will die.
Mm,
90% of people cannot change their behavior.
wow.
And so you were that 10%, right?
Hmm.
And it talks about how, to, it calls it the 3 R's, how to change your behaviors. And one was relate, like join a community that can support you. Two was repetition, and do something repetitive on a regular basis. Still in the book, and I can't remember number three. And I was curious if you worked, if because we talked about being solo, and I'll get back to discipline. But did you have a team of people you're working with, or community of other people trying to lose weight that you worked with to help you, or were you just doing it solo?
I've been an athlete all my life, David. I said, I got myself here. I'm going to get myself out. But as far as like when I would practice for the triathlons, I would do that with a team.
Just hold on a second. You said you've been an athlete your whole life. So was there a point before you were overweight where you were in good shape, and then something
I was
happened?
absolutely. I was great. I
What
played
happened?
soccer all my life. I started a business and I worked 16-hour days and drank soda and ate pizza for a year and a
But
half.
you would think that like you would notice during that time period
You would. You
that
would. I didn't. I didn't. And I said to my friends, I see pictures of myself and I say to my friends, why didn't you guys say something to me? Why didn't you guys saw me gain all this weight? I was a size 46-inch waist.
it's interesting for me. Like weight is obviously part of it, but
Yeah.
the other part of it is like how I eat. I'm a
Mm,
vegetarian, and it's about my energy level. And so when I eat unhealthy, generally, I don't have good energy. Did you feel that as well?
It's amazing. Your body just gets used to it. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it at all.
Yeah. So it's, thank you for sharing it. Like, so yeah, discipline, David Goggins is like the master at like hating running, hating everything. It's all about being, the more disciplined you are, the more you'll be able to handle tough stuff that happen to you. And so I've actually had a pretty easy life, right? Not too much struggle, to be honest. And that is an insecurity of mine, because, the softer your life and the softer you are, sometimes you're not as tough. And, that saying of like, I'm not going to do well with it, but like the first generation who makes the money, the second generation lives well, the third generation eats nice, and the fourth generation by that time has nothing left. Something.
Right,
And
right.
so I want to be more disciplined, um, and I think that's what most people are hard on themselves on. But you spend too much time, like you said, being upset with yourself that you didn't wake up early enough, that you didn't
Mm.
exercise, that you didn't focus long enough, that you didn't do this, and sometimes it gets exhausting, trying to be more disciplined.
And it beats you up.
It
It's
does.
interesting, but I mean, you wrote a book. I mean, you're president of EO. You're a CEO of a corporation. It would seem to me that these things all require levels of discipline.
Don't get me wrong. I do have discipline. I mean,
Mm.
that's, and when I'm in my zone, it's like the best feeling ever. Um, I probably, again, the discipline most specifically is exercise that frustrates me the most. And yeah, I think, and it's just the small things. It's 20 minutes a day, you
Yeah, oh,
know,
yeah.
15, 20 minutes a day. And most recently, as an example, I've had a bad back for 20 years. I most recently herniated my disc. I couldn't move. Even like I ran yesterday, I walked a lot yesterday. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, shit, I couldn't move. And
Mm.
I'm like, well, serves you right. You haven't been doing your PT every day as you should be. Um, and and you know what it is? My dad, to be honest, he had a bad back. My dad is as disciplined as it comes,
Hmm.
exercising every day, uh, very thorough, very accomplished real estate investor, entrepreneur, and and he came from nothing. His dad died when he was 7, and a single mother first drove taxis to get through college. Um, the whole thing that you hear in those stories. And so yeah, I, I respect that, and so I think it's just always wanting to be a little bit more. And so like I don't know what that means, because I certainly don't think it's just about. I'm sure if I woke up, I will say this. I'll end on this. When I do exercise on a regular basis, I feel much happier.
Yeah, me too. Your body rewards you. It's what it wants.
That's 100%, and you feel accomplished, especially,
Yeah.
and that's what running does for me. And so when my back is bad, it's tough. But when you actually exercise your muscles and do weights, that pump is really rewarding as well. I did yoga during COVID when we were in lockdown in Spain. I love that. So yeah, I think that those specific areas, um, and I think I just watched this video this morning. It says about freedom. It's like people think freedom is about having a calendar with nothing on it, so you can do whatever you
Mm.
want. And it's the opposite. It's about having a calendar with intention of what you want to do and putting it there. Because the worst thing you can have is a calendar with nothing on it, because your lizard brain will just want you to lie down on your couch and watch TV or go through social media, because that's what you're always fighting against. And so if you look at your calendar, you don't know what you're doing that day. If you don't have that intention, you're 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 starting. But for me, at least, it's a harder thing. So when I do my early morning wake ups, the last thing I do is I actually look at my digital calendar and I write down what are my top tasks for that day, and then I organize them when I'm going to do them. So even if I don't do them, at least I know what my intention was for that day. And the days I don't do that, guess what? It's not as accomplished.
David Schnurman, what motivates you?
I want to say having impact. My only caveat that I was talking to someone about it recently, and I wonder how much of that is ego versus actual wanting. And I say impact, millions of people impact. Because certainly there's an argument to be made, especially with the 35, 40 people at Lawline, I can have a direct impact there, right? Especially with my kids, right? We both know that. That's, they always say your biggest legacy. So I wonder if wanting to impact millions of people is a good thing to be motivated by. Because I certainly, 45, I haven't gotten there yet. It doesn't mean I can't, but I've impacted hundreds, if maybe thousands of people. So I think that's one. But ultimately, it's tied to this. It's that phrase, living a life with no regrets, and that's what the fast forward mindset is. It's like in 20 years, I can look back and know that I've done everything I wanted to, and so to me, it goes back to discipline. I think the more disciplined you are, the more you can live that life and be more motivated to get there. So that's the best I can give to you right now. And look, yeah, I want to have a lot. I don't need toys, but I want to have a financial stable legacy that can be for generations to come.
And how do you measure success?
It's a simple question, right?
Simple.
And so obviously it depends on what area you're talking about, because in each area of your life, it's measured differently. Whether it's running a marathon, what success is there. If it's building a business, it probably is revenue to some degree, but it's also like the product that you built and the amount of impact you have there. But I think what they say with your kids is, don't say to them, you did a great job, or don't say to them, I'm proud of you. Instead say, you must be really proud. And so I think the same thing goes internally. If you're really proud of the effort of what you put in there, and you feel it, ultimately that's, I think, what success is.
That's well said.
Thank you.
Well, Dave, it was a great pleasure talking to you.
I figured it worked out.
Well, that's the idea. I mean, those two questions they could change every day, every hour, right? What motivates you? How do you measure success? There's no finite answer. I wonder if we asked ChatGPT what they would say. You know what? Maybe I'll give it a shot.
A boring answer, but
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. Really, really enjoyed this convo.
I really appreciate it. How can we get in touch with you? Anybody who's listening?
Yeah, I think the best way is LinkedIn. As I said, I post every day. So just put my name in LinkedIn, connect with me or follow, and yeah, reach out.
Yeah, the Fast Forward Mindset too, by the way. The website has everything about your book. David's last name, your last name is Schnurman, David Schnurman. Look him up on LinkedIn. We'll put it all in the show notes. In the show notes.
Schnurman notes.
Yeah, look at that. It's all yours. You could take it. You could take it.
Just a funny story on that to end it off is my wife used to be a social worker in liver transplant in Mount Sinai Hospital. And so her voice and her last name was Kalimi. And so she made that her middle name. So she would leave a voicemail, hi, you've reached Kelly Kalimi, Schnurman social worker in the Mount Sinai Hospital. And somebody goes, hi, Kelly Kalimi. She's like, what's a Schnurman social worker?
What a great way to end. David, I appreciate it. I hope one day we can have a cup of coffee when I'm back in the Northeast there in the Brooklyn area. We'll have a cup of coffee, and I really appreciate your time today. You be well.
You too. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.